Thanks for joining us for another episode of Biotech CEOs. Today we have four very special guests, my friends, who are going to share with us the story behind all the momentum driving life sciences development in Atlanta. That's right, I said Atlanta. Eddie Lay represents the Chamber of Commerce. Courtney Law represents a group called Biolocity, which bridges two outstanding universities, Emory and Georgia Tech. Ryan Lawler is from Biosparks Labs, and Suna Lumeh is representing a VC with a very different business model called Portal Innovations. I'll be sharing more about each one and their organizations as we go through the podcast. But welcome to all of you. I'm really excited to have all of you here. I'll start with you, Eddie. Eddie is the senior manager of life sciences and digital health for MetroAtlanta Chamber of Commerce. And he directs the Metro Chamber's recruitment and growth strategies for life sciences. Prior to joining the Chamber here in Atlanta, Eddie served as the Operations and Strategy Administrative Fellow at Emory Healthcare, and then as the first administrator of Emory Healthcare's Innovation Lab, of course, here in Atlanta. Eddie's got a BS in Health Services from Drexel University and a master's in Public Health from Boston University. Eddie, can you give us a feeling in terms of where Atlanta currently stands in terms of life sciences, how many people work in the field, what the economic contribution is, what have been the traditional strengths, that sort of thing?
Sure thing. Thanks again for the intro, Tim, and appreciate you having me on the show today, and great to be here with friends as well. So as mentioned, Eddie Law with the MetroAtlanta Chamber, been doing this role now for a year, almost 2 years, and so and coming from myself, the healthcare delivery side of things at Emory Healthcare, which is of course one of our local academic medical centers as part of our healthcare system, and later on we'll talk about it, I'm sure, as well, but part of the larger life sciences healthcare ecosystem as we talk about the growth in the area. And just for some background, I cover Metro Atlanta, and so we're 29 counties that's federally designated. And so a large catchment area, but certainly a lot of different opportunities for activity going on in life sciences. The activity is as many in markets are driven by is largely from some of the universities that are in our area, as well as just companies coming here. And we'll talk about it soon as well. But some of the things that we talk about in regards to reasons to come to Georgia and to the Metro Atlanta region include the affordability, not only of general cost of living compared to other markets that life sciences and biotech might be hot in, but also the cost of doing business. In fact, Georgia was just ranked the #1 state to do business for the 10th year in a row by Area Magazine, which we were celebrating all locally with our different partners. And to get a sense of the companies in the region, there's a mix of pharmaceutical manufacturing and R&D and biotech as well, whether that's startup or large, household names that I'm sure we'll talk about later as well. But certainly a range all across the state and certainly in the metro. And so in regards to numbers, we can drill down on that, but certainly, coming from the workforce, from the different schools, as well as the technical colleges and training programs in the area continues to grow and shows promise of a lot of growth into the future.
Is there a budget, Eddie, in terms of where the leaders in city government and the chamber might hope to see the city in terms of life sciences, say in 5 years? Is there a goal?
We as a regional chamber, we're private, not for profit, certainly working with our local city governments and municipal and county groups. But in regards to what the future promises, I think that a lot of the local economic development groups are very hopeful for the future. I'll give an example that we just went to Bio International in Boston, which of course is known as the healthcare mecca in some ways, and biotech mecca. And we had a number of communities all throughout the metro and the state contribute funds to help showcase Georgia to the world, really, as well as showcase what we're doing to kind of a more curated reception type situation. And so I think the local folks with economic development, as well as the students and faculty, are all really excited about what's to come. In terms of specifics, I think everyone's trying their best intentionally to make sure that we are growing the region. So some examples of that are certain cities and regions are changing their zoning laws, right, to be able to accommodate for things such as office space to lab conversions, or a little bit more leniency with ability to kind of build up that life sciences ecosystem. Just last week at the Georgia Bio Life Sciences Summit, the Bio Ready Cities initiatives was announced, communities initiatives was announced, that was kind of lifted from the Mass Life Sciences program to help communities and cities and regions position themselves to have the right resources and infrastructure to be ready for life sciences companies, whether that's, again, early stage R&D to manufacturing of all sorts. And so in terms of budget and promise, I think everyone's looking forward to that future, and that's demonstrated by some of these things that I just listed above.
Okay, good. So Courtney Law is the managing director at Biolocity, and it provides funding and project management and consulting services to new technologies from Emory and Georgia Tech. And since 2015, the program's awarded more than $10 million across, I think, 65 different projects, and ultimately generated more than 160 million in follow-on investment. Prior to moving to Atlanta, Courtney was at Gonzaga Universities, and she was the director of the University of Washington School of Medicine, Gonzaga University Regional Health Partnership, working with both institutions to advance research and entrepreneurship. So kind of a stepping stone to now working between Emory and Georgia Tech. Courtney has a PhD in pharmaceutical studies from North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and completed her postdoc work at the Biomanufacturing Research Institute in Durham, North Carolina. Courtney, I'm going to call it a joint venture, but maybe you can better inform me. Between Georgia Tech and Emory, how did that bioengineering program, how did it come about? And I know it's received some notoriety recently. Maybe you can tell us about that, and especially spotlight why the success of that sort of combination is so unusual and inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me and for that introduction. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about our department and our program. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about Biolocity. We are that early stage funding for technologies out of Emory and Georgia Tech, but we've been a part of the Department of Biomedical Engineering since its inception over 25 years ago. We have changed and evolved as the needs of our program has evolved, but the development of our department was around really supporting and promoting biomedical research, and then also that translation of the research, so going from bench to bedside. So it's a unique department because it is between a public and private institution. It is officially the Wallace H. Coulter Department. So we are actually a part of a network of other Coulter translational programs across the US, all trying to support commercialization. As you mentioned, we recently got a few great marks. I think in this last year, we've been ranked #1, both from the undergraduate and graduate programs. So it's really great to, one, be a part of this department, be a part of these institutions, and being able to continue to foster innovation out of, or health-related innovation out of the schools.
Great, great. Ryan Lawler is the general manager of Biosparks Labs. It's a nonprofit providing shared wet lab and clean room space for life sciences, anchored in the new Atlanta Science Square. Ryan has over a decade of experience as an administrative leader and biotech manager in the public and private sector. She supports the growth of life sciences as part of the Science Square development and manages the startup activities of Biosparks Labs. Ryan's a graduate of University of Georgia and has an MBA from Georgia Tech. Ryan, you're working through Biosparks Labs to facilitate, in terms of lab space in particular, efforts to help academics at Georgia Tech think about commercializing their research. And part of that effort is the development of Science Square, which abuts the Georgia Tech campus. Can you tell us how that came to be and what your vision is in terms of its development and your space in it?
Yeah, so Biosparks Labs, like Tim mentioned, it's a wet lab clean room facility for early stage startup companies. We have artificial ligaments, a knee meniscus implant, and bioinformatics that replace live animal models going on in this space. But Biosparks Labs was founded and funded by the Economic Development Affiliate of Georgia Tech, known as Georgia Advanced Technology Ventures. There's a $10.5 million investment in the build out of equipment, infrastructure, and the building here. So Biosparks Labs supports the entire life science community in Atlanta and in the state of Georgia. Going on to the vision for success here in Science Square and Biosparks, we really want to just allow companies to commercialize their life science technology to improve the human condition, consistent with our institute's strategic goals, while also engaging the West Side community of English Avenue, Vine City, to be a part of this redevelopment.
Great. Suna Lumeh is the Director of Operations at Portal Innovations of Atlanta. Portal Innovations is a venture development engine that bridges research and entrepreneurship in the life sciences through the commercial proof of concept level by delivering seed capital, lab space and equipment, and management expertise to early stage companies. Suna holds a BS in biomedical engineering from George Washington, a master's in material science and engineering with a nanotechnology focus from Johns Hopkins, and an MBA from the business school at Emory, where she's also served as a graduate teaching assistant in entrepreneurship. Suna, can you share with us a little bit about the business model at Portal? Because it's really unique.
Yeah, it's thank you for that, Tim. Thanks for the introduction. So Portal, if it is what it's called, right? It's a portal to resources, and we do have a focus on early stage biotech companies. Aside from a traditional VC operational model, we do consider ourselves as providing more resources to help accelerate the process of commercialization in a very critical time, which is, the point in which some people call the valley of death, but the valley of death as results from biotech founders and teams trying to get to a certain point where they can actually start to accelerate and scale, do the experimentation and clinical and preclinical studies that are required to help them keep going and make more discoveries, get closer to getting to the patient. So we are a for-profit, just like many VCs, but we also provide lab space, fully equipped lab space, very similar to university core shared equipment. The reasoning for that is that, sometimes companies, when they do spin out of the universities, which is a very traditional model of how to actually launch a biotech startup, all this in wet lab space, is that those facilities are hard to come by outside of the university system. And there's a very different mindset versus academic research even internal innovation coming from faculty, and then being in an environment that reinforces that entrepreneurial spirit. You're going through the same difficulties, looking at problems in a more commercialized lens. And so to be able to be an engine in which we can provide resources, not only capital, but also access to the expensive equipment that most companies would spend a pretty dime on, very similar to Biosparks. We want to provide that so that you're not spending this early stage capital on those equipment, right? And then also getting access to our network. And we have a national network. So we are launching in Atlanta, but our headquarters is in Chicago. We have an office in South Boston, and then also one coming in Houston. So leveraging the resources nationally and pouring it into the founders that are working out of our space so that we can accelerate their ability to secure Series A funding. And so that's essentially our model, is how can we be a portal to the national resources in these emerging ecosystems, and how can we really bolster, support, and pour into the ecosystems with our partners, Biolocity, the MAC, and also the companies who are nearby us at Biospark and these other labs. Like, how do we really buy into the theory of rising tide lifts all ships? Well, you need to keep the talent here. You need to allow them to scale. You need to pour into them and show them all the love, and how that kind of translates into biomedical commercialization success, like what that means in our field. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But how do we really just like put them in this situation where you're getting easier access to capital, to resources, to knowledge? And then how our theory and what we're testing out ourselves is that should lead to a scalable business that has everything it needs to scale locally, even though it's in a traditionally unrecognized or emerging ecosystem that tends to have features that don't resemble the coasts, right? So,
Right.
So we're testing that out. That's our model.
That is the most interesting part of it to me, because you're going where they ain't.
Yeah.
Right. You are in Boston, but it's a smaller operation there. You need to have a presence there, but you're not yet in San Francisco. How did you decide to come to Atlanta?
Well, it really did. It is based off of the experience of Portal's CEO and founder, which is John Flavin, who has traditionally worked with the entrepreneurial side of a lot of research institutions in Chicago. And he's had successes of sending companies that were born in an emerging ecosystem of Chicago and securing successful rounds, and then seeing those companies go to Boston just because the resources were in Boston, especially the money, the capital, the VCs that typically, traditionally want to be nearby these companies that they're investing in. They want to see them. And so his whole theory is that, not everybody wants to live in Boston. And that might be a disservice, because even though it is the global capital of biotech research, it's still a bubble. And so to send something that's born of the essence of one ecosystem to another ecosystem, you're almost implying that company is going to be shifting and changing in a certain way, losing some of that essence that could have made it very successful had it continued to scale in that local ecosystem. So the thought of Portal is to, hey, let's find some investors that believe that the talent, the science, everything's robust. And it was in Chicago. I want to say we're looking at like a 5 to 8 year lead that they have on something like Atlanta, but essentially it's the numbers of patents coming out of world-renowned universities, the innovators, the historical record of licensing out great IP to big pharma that goes in early and develops it in their institutions. So just looking at all these factors, and especially the talent, and great talent exists everywhere. And from a humanistic kind of vision, it's like not every human wants to live in Boston. So how do we allow people to really embrace their environment that they want to be around, maintain that essence in these ecosystems, but then how do we make sure we're giving them what that ecosystem is lacking? So we really look for those types of numbers and metrics. It's the talent, it's the university reputation, it's IP.
Yeah, not everyone wants to live in Boston. You know, every time I go to Boston, it could be in June, it's cold. Every single time. So
yeah.
how did this, you know, each of you considers the others as partners, right? All driving toward the same goal. But how did it come together? What was the momentum? What was the unifying force? Can anyone speak to that?
I'll jump in, and I want to make a note real quick. I think as you were going through our intros and we were talking through the different markets and you know, as we ultimately talk about Atlanta, you'll see that a lot of us on this call, right, have spent a lot of time in other markets, right? And so for us to be here talking about Atlanta, partially it is our jobs, but partially we all see kind of the assets and the opportunity that exists, having been in the other markets, having been in those bubbles, right? And so that's where it's exciting to kind of pontificate and talk about this. But I'll answer, take a stab at your initial question. For the chamber, our whole goal is to support the business community and really ultimately the growth of the number of jobs in the region. And to me, as someone who kind of studied in healthcare and went to delivery, I always think about the mission. And ultimately, the mission here is to increase the number of jobs to then help people, right, find these opportunities. And of course, when we talk about life sciences, in terms of industry, whether that again is from the R&D side to the venture capital side to manufacturing, do provide great wages to the people, and so that's where we see some opportunity and benefit. But in regards to working together, you see that each of us kind of represent a different part of the spectrum, if you will, of a company's life stage and growth, from development, from an academic side with Courtney and Biolocity and her team and the venture capital needed to find the success to get through those valleys, right? With Suna and Portal and to house these places so that they can do the research they need to get ultimately, like we talked about, therapeutics and treatments to the right people. And I can see the chamber as part of that as well in regards to helping them find success in regards to connecting to these folks. So what's cool is that because we all know each other, whenever we hear about things in the news or companies who are interested in Atlanta, whether that's coming from a VC side or coming out of an academic side or looking for space, we all talk to each other. And for me, vice versa. If I'm talking to an early stage company or even someone with an idea, I'll say, well, do you know Suna? Do you know Courtney? Do you know Ryan? Depending on kind of what area they're coming from. And I think that's where the strength of Atlanta and maybe the South comes from. I think in the Northeast, again, I grew up there, so don't take me wrong on this, but it can be very like ivory tower-ish, right? Just academic and competitive. But Atlanta is a market where you can have that same willpower and staying power and kind of growth power of these companies, but you still have that Southern hospitality charm and collaboration, which I think doesn't just exist in our ecosystem here, but extends into all the business community.
Right. Okay. So we started as this podcast did, I guess, in terms of spotlighting CEO journeys and stories. But it's become, I think, a podcast to some degree for entrepreneurs, for founders. So Ryan, what is the process? Someone's in a lab, in an academic lab at Tech, and they have an idea that they think could have commercial potential. What is the process in terms of lab space at Biolocity? What happens? How does that occur?
So if a company is needing lab space, well, typically, yeah, that's first, they might have a patent, they might have funding, and then they sort of think of, okay, well, I need a house. How do I move out of my academic lab into a space? So we try to offer, we just expanded So it's really word of mouth right now, but if somebody reaches out to us, then we qualify them, make sure that they have a life science research focus, so then they can get into the space. There's a shortage of wet lab and clean room space here for commercialization in Atlanta, which is kind of the reason behind the genesis of Science Square. But does that sort of answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
So one of the things that I always think about is how life sciences entrepreneurs are different from other tech entrepreneurs. One of them, I think, is that they are not at all driven by money. But let's talk for a minute about what their needs are, maybe Suna, particularly in terms of mentorship, as opposed to other tech entrepreneurs or other entrepreneurs who are kind of just making widgets.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question, Tim. And so I'm gonna request like a tag team here because
Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
feel like Courtney, even what's unique about all of us is we come from different backgrounds, but I feel like, Courtney's ability, who's gone further down the path of what most biotech, because it's deep tech, you have to have like a real specialized knowledge. And that takes sometimes years to develop and expertise. And, anybody who's gone through a PhD program has kind of been formed to hit certain marks and second guess their abilities, and then get to a point where they have the confidence and the knowledge and the information they need to self-prove their knowledge base. And I feel like that's a very special skill set that comes with a lot of biotech founders in this field versus like IT digital type platforms where the high schooler could beat you out. Just because they've been tinkering on computer platforms, right? This is just a very different, I think, process to get to the point where you have the confidence to even say, I think I have something here. So I'm going to take it to there and just say that in my experience, to actually have, say it with your chest, I'm an entrepreneur. I think that's a whole process in itself that comes from discovering being in the right place at the right time in the right environment that actually pours into that notion versus steering some of these minds more towards applying their curiosity to just discovery and research. I think there's a whole process, and so this is where I'm going to kick it off to Courtney, because I think she would be a better position to kind of talk through how it makes them different. I think it's very unique to this field.
Court?
Yeah, no, that's great. I like your example of the tinkering versus, the time spent. Part of it is the tools that are available at the time, right? So by going to undergrad, graduate school, you have different tools that are available to you that may not be available to you earlier, just in terms of being within a laboratory. But I think from my perspective, especially working in the academic realm, that is the lifestyle that most folks are leading. Like, I'm here to do a lot of research, I'm here to teach, but I'm also very interested in being a serial innovator. I think over the last few years, especially even in the time that I've been in this space, this field, I continue to see an increase in not only faculty members, but students that are interested in more of the entrepreneurial side as well. Like, I'm really excited about, they come with the mindset, I'm really excited about the discoveries that I'm making, but I'm also really excited about how I am going from bench to bedside. How am I getting these technologies out? And so there's several programs that I've seen even locally between Emory and Georgia Tech, and I think even in the community, that are student focused, where they are exploring those opportunities. They're leveraging all of our resources to get that management talent perspective, that business perspective. So they're learning alongside their more traditional research studies, like, how am I thinking about the business? And it's not, like I said, it's not even limited to like, hey, we're in the life sciences. I know the business schools have been involved and continuously want to get more involved. So I think it is a community-wide effort to kind of support this, I think, budding group of entrepreneurs that are coming out of the universities.
It's interesting because You both mentioned sort of the difference, biotech to just, a guy fiddling with computers. And there's a great documentary on Netflix about Jim Allison, who's responsible for developing the PDL-1. And he did it in a completely offbeat way that everybody thought was crazy. And he said that to be successful, you have to start by doing everything you can to disprove what you think is right. And that's completely different from the way anybody else goes about, approaching building a business.
Well, to be fair, I think what's interesting about the business world, if you'd agree, Tim, is they're almost taking more of a scientific approach to building businesses now. So that's like the discovery and challenging what they think is going to be successful. So what I think is very interesting is now people who are business minded are stepping into, like, putting on their scientist hat and almost taking from how we went from discovery and applying it to businesses.
Right. So there's a man and a woman in a lab. They're both postdocs, and they have an idea. What particular advice might you have for them as they think about turning that idea into a company? Anybody want to take that?
Well, for mine, I think it's exactly what you just said. You got to prove it wrong. That's the whole fail fast approach to save money, time. And I think what makes this industry very special is even when you fail, the industry wins, because that's information that somebody else can see a light forward in. Oh, that didn't work. That must mean this. So let me take it forward. So I think the way we work, it's unfortunate that still I think failure has this negative stigma to it, but you want to fail really, really fast. You do want to go out. If the sky is blue, I want you telling me it's purple and telling me why it's not purple, and showing me the data that says it's not purple, because all that information, if it checks out, it means you're so good. You're so onto something, and that's information everybody can use to build off of. But yeah, you gotta fail. You gotta go to lose. You gotta be ready to lose, because even in your failures, you're gonna feed information that's gonna drive you forward or your team forward. It's gonna drive a spark. That's why you have brilliance in this industry too. It's gonna start triggering some kind of like, oh, we should try it this way. We should do it this way instead. Oh, that's not true. Good to know. Now we're not going to waste time and money, and we're going to probably get closer to the answer that we're trying to get. But that's mine. Exactly what you said.
Anybody like to add anything?
Yeah,
I would add. Oh, go on, Courtney.
Oh, I'll make it short. You're right. I was like, once you said spark, I was like, ooh, right. One thing I would say is reach out. There's no shortage of resources. And we're all part of an ecosystem. So it is really getting outside of your lab, getting outside of the folks that you normally talk to. You're going to get a lot of opinions from a lot of different people, but part of the process is deciphering which information is the information or advice that you're going to take to move forward. Because the whole idea is, again, like Suna said, it benefits if you're like, oh, I have this idea, maybe this isn't the right approach. Now it opens you up for time to think about something else. But I think the getting outside of the lab and learning what these resources are, there's sometimes is word of mouth, sometimes they're advertised, but I think it is like becoming part of the community helps you actually go through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to piggyback off of that, I think two postdocs have an idea. One approach, first go to your institution's commercialization office. If you're at Georgia Tech, I would encourage you to talk to Harold Solomon and from Venture Labs. You would need to get that coaching on what it takes to go from an idea to a business. What are the steps to get there? Biolocity might be able to help you in that area as well. But also, once Science Square is done in the spring, come over here, meet people here in the ecosystem. go to social events. And it's not just it's not just for fun and recreation, but it's also because you're actually starting to make those connections, understand how your idea can be useful in the space here. So I would encourage that.
Yeah.
And I'll say, oh, go ahead, Tim.
No, please.
To cap that off, I would say, additional to looking at these resources and to Suna's earlier point on the scientific side of, failing fast and kind of that principle is, as you go and as you grow and as you kind of think about the future practically, thinking about, what those needs are going to be in terms of expenses and access and things like that. And ultimately, that's where I think companies will be driven to come to Atlanta and pay attention to that more, whether they're already here, coming out of the great academic institutions we have, or in markets where maybe they're feeling the squeeze of rent, right? Or they want to get away from the cold. As simple as that. I mean, all types of ways that people are thinking about practically how to grow their company in in the kind of environment we live in, right? In the both virtual and kind of practical sense that we need to engage with.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned the competitiveness of the coast. And that's part of how I think about the benefit and the opportunity of Atlanta, because what is demonstrated by this association and podcast is that, unlike the coast, this is a nurturing kind of environment. And I think that one of the differences between biotech entrepreneurs and others is that the science and the personalities, to some degree, of those entrepreneurs can benefit more than others from that kind of nurturing. That's what's most exciting. That's what sets this apart from Boston, San Francisco. That's what's important here.
Yeah, Tim, I really appreciate that. I think to your point, especially in biotech and in healthcare and these fields, a lot of people came into it because they wanted to help people, right? Whether that's on the delivery side of, getting these therapeutics to the patients directly at bedside, or on the R&D side and thinking through and the challenges that need to get through to practically heal people, right? And so to your point, the personalities I've found who are in this are oftentimes not only very knowledgeable, but they're very mission driven, right? And so kind of how do you, and now the question comes on the business side then, what practical steps do you need to marry that mission plus the realities that exist to build your company so that your mission can be fulfilled?
So we've talked about all the benefits of what's happening in Atlanta, all the excitement, the momentum. But let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges and what is happening to overcome those. And I'm sure everyone's got a feeling about that. But maybe we'll start with Ryan.
Yeah, so one thing that we see, right, well, of course, the shortage of space available for commercialization, but I think our civic leaders and institutions are tired of the exodus of IP, of researchers, of commercialization, and of jobs from the Atlanta market. And so I think the emergence of Atlanta as a life science destination was recognized by national real estate. And that's what funded Science Square, CalSTRS, the California Teachers Retirement of California, and Trammell Crow, see the strength here in Atlanta from the research institutions and the state of Georgia, from the hospitals, from the CDC, and the talent. That's the things that Suna said of why Portal picked this place.
Right, and there's a CalSTRS connection directly with Portal as well, right, Suna?
Yeah, there's some LPs for us.
Yeah. Okay. Courtney?
Yeah, no, I think Ryan said it beautifully. I think So I'm still relatively new to Atlanta. I feel like I'm relatively new. I've been here for 3 years. I think actually in these 3 years, Eddie, Ryan, and Suna, all of your positions were created in these 3 years, in the last 3 years. So I think that it's a testament of the ecosystem seeing where there are gaps. It's like, what do we need? Lab space. What do we need to support more funding coming in? And it's not, let's just build for now. It's building for the future. And so I think some of the gaps, like, which I think are gaps in a lot of different ecosystems. It's always like, where's the talent? Where's the lab space, and where's the funding? I think the community itself is saying, okay, we're here, we hear you. How do we start supporting those, either building infrastructure or bringing in additional folks from outside to help, again, keep folks here, but support the ecosystem here. So I think the more conversations that we have like this, and the conversations that we have within the community, helps us to continuously improve how we're supporting the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks for that, Courtney. I'll just note, actually, the chamber's been involved with some form of life sciences and healthcare and digital health IT since honestly the early 2000s, which is really cool, because I've been able to kind of see and dig into some of the history and some of the different initiatives that have been exciting, and even the IP and the companies that have come through and come out of Atlanta. But I would say that as Ryan and Suna and Courtney kind of mentioned, some of the pieces that are now being addressed in regards to space, non-academic space, in regards to early stage funding, in regards to the workforce as well. I think that these are certainly things that are always part of any company's growth. In Atlanta, like we said, we look at these problems and we try to think creatively and solve them in the way that we do, and who we are. But looking to see, not replicating necessarily, I'm certainly like looking at what other markets have done, but knowing that we already have all the assets we need, and so how do we catalyze that in a way that will be very practical, but also kind of efficient and strategic into the future.
Atlanta is a nascent life sciences community. And so to that degree, all of you are entrepreneurs. You're building something from almost nothing. And so entrepreneurs dream, and then they work to realize those dreams. So I'd like to ask how each of you see this work germinating, and what success means in 10 years. Anybody want to start with that?
I'll start by saying, in 10 years, what success will look like is we will have a very succinct and clear answer for you. When you say 2 postdocs, a boy and a girl, have an idea, what do they do? It'll be like, look, there's exactly, here's what you do, because it's happening all of the time here. And a lot of people, it's common knowledge now.
Okay.
And yeah, I think for me, yeah, I'm a dreamer. I think 10 years from now, it's not that I'm anti-Boston, even though I'm a Ravens fan. It is that I believe in inclusion. And I do think that this is why Atlanta is seen as so special. As compared to Chicago, which is also a very diverse ecosystem, there is no other city in the US that produces the type of talent that Atlanta has been able to produce, and even retain to a certain extent, in terms of just women in this field, in terms of underrepresented minorities in this field. I think what's beautiful, which is also the same challenge, is that whereas some of these more established ecosystems are well structured and their limits are almost realized, there is no limit here in Atlanta. And so what I am seeing is, by having it be naturally, not even forcefully, just by way of being here, even just look at the screen, just by Atlanta being Atlanta, you're going to get representation from a vast amount of people coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. I think when you have that many voices coming to a proverbial table or walking a certain path and saying, like, coming together for a mission, as Eddie kind of alludes to, of just like, let's walk together. We're learning how to walk together because we have no limit. It's never been done before. It's never been seen before. So what happens when you start to add discovery and support and capital and infrastructure and resources and knowledge into that pot, to where somebody who in some of these other ecosystems probably had more limitations to even start executing on that idea. Now you're going to see that idea make it to a stage where it's going to be on a platform. People are not even going to realize that was a problem. I feel like there is no other city in the US where you can bring these resources together and 10 years from now, start addressing problems or actually solving problems, developing the devices, developing the therapeutics that solve problems that people didn't even know was a thing because it was in a different ecosystem and it just didn't grow there. So what I'm seeing in 10 years is we're creating a new industry here in Atlanta. When we say biotech, it's going to mean so much more than it means today.
Good, good. Courtney.
Oh, I follow these. I think Ryan and Suna really hit it on the head. I think what I see, I feel like there's just so much good stuff coming out of the institutions. And I only get to sit really between Emory and Georgia Tech. When I talk to folks at other institutions locally, like whether it's GSU or watching people talk from Morehouse or what's going on in Spelman, I feel like there's so many different institutions. And then even broader outside of Atlanta, UGA, my friends there, or the folks at like the middle, like in Augusta. I think there's just so much going on that hopefully will continue to grow in our support and be able to have more of that connectivity. So it is more like, oh, I'm doing X research with folks at Children's, or I'm doing X research with whatever other school or the CDC or wherever. But there's that infrastructure that's now supporting all those things. So right now, I think we all have our different touch points because we all have our focus. But I think in 10 years, like Suna said, I think being able to see what all the different infrastructure, the different research that's going on in these different institutions, I think brings a different flavor because there's not another ecosystem like this one. So I think that we have the unique opportunity to like really put our mark on the world.
You know, one thing that Suna posted, I think I shared it with her first, and she made some great broadcasts to the world. But Future, who's the rapper, he has a STEM lab here in Atlanta through his foundation. I think it's the family foundation that he does. But you know, Suna put it really great. You know, where else but Atlanta can you have a rapper with a STEM lab, right? And so to that point, what I see in 10 years is opportunities for people here to have jobs that are meaningful. I mean, every job is meaningful, but you know, in life sciences, again, we're biased on this call, but you know, we believe that the things that are being done here are really changing the world and lives, and so that those people can look to the Biosparks and the science squares and you know, the portals of the world and say, like, I can be that when I grow up, and I can stay here to do that. Additionally, I think that we're going to see, again, putting on my Chamber of Commerce hat, is that we're going to see a mix of companies that are coming out of the institutions here, not just having an asterisk saying, oh, the IP was developed at so-and-so university, but rather that this company was made and built and grown here, right? And then that we're not aligned in the article, but we're the headline. Additionally, you know, again, small companies, big companies, attracting the incumbents that exist and growing the future incumbents of the future. And so as a call to action, I would tell people that and I tell this to my friends in the Northeast all the time, next time you're flying through Atlanta, not just as a layover, get off the plane, hit one of us up, any of us on this call, and we'll show you around. And next time, instead of getting off the plane for a layover, you're going to be landing here as your future destination.
All very well said. I think what you're all saying is that what's special about this is that it can be anything we want because it's just starting. And so what I would say to that man or woman on a lab bench at Tech or Emory or wherever it happens to be, a garage, I don't know, is that yes, you can build your company here, and yes, you can sell it to Merck for $1 billion. But you can do one more thing. By staying here, you can help to create an environment that will help other entrepreneurs help more patients and sell their company to Merck for $1 billion. And that, more than the medicine that you created, is a legacy. And that's more important than money. So I'd like to thank everyone for being my guest today. I hope that everyone's gotten a flavor for what's happening in Atlanta and how excited we are about it. And please feel free to, as Eddie said, hit each one of us up on LinkedIn or whatever it happens to be. And we'd love to share more about the momentum that is happening in Atlanta. Thank you all very much for your time. I enjoyed it tremendously.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Tim. It was fun.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for tuning in to the Life Sciences and Biotech podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. The information contained in this website and podcast are purely informational and not considered investment recommendations. Tim Doherty's participation in Biotech Insights is separate and apart from his role as an investment advisor representative. Nothing contained herein can be construed as a recommendation or endorsement of any of the companies discussed. Tim Doherty also has no financial affiliation with any of the companies mentioned in this communication. Tim Doherty makes no representation that the information contained in this material is accurate and is under no obligation to update this information as changes occur.